Hey Risa, today I am here to talk to you guys all about our transition from 2 to 3 kids at home. So Lexi is now going on 5 months old, and I feel like I'm finally ready to do this video just a little bit. I feel like we'll be adjusting for a while. That just happens when you have a baby. But I feel like enough of the adjustment is underway or has happened that I can finally kind of speak to it. I know I did a video going from 1 to 2 kids, so I will leave that linked as well, our experience with adding Remy to our family, and now we're adding Lexi. So for those of you who might be new to my channel or my videos, we have a 5-year-old daughter, Sophie, a 3.5, almost 4. Need to stop saying she's 3.5, almost 4-year-old daughter, Remy, and like I said, Lexi is almost 5 months old. So that's just kind of a glance at our little family. I've got a lot of questions even before she was here, what we're doing to help them adjust, and also obviously in the weeks after she was here, what we were doing then. And now that we're a few months out, I feel like I get questions on like how the transition actually went. And like I said, I feel like for a while you are transitioning. It's obviously not like an overnight kind of thing. It doesn't happen within a couple weeks or two and then it's fine. Like everybody has to adjust because like the seasons of life are all different. And I mean actual seasons, like the kids are used to the summer plans being we can go pretty much do whatever we want on a whim, but now we have a baby and mom breastfeeds and stuff like that. So, different parts of their lives are going to be different the more we get into different seasons. So, it's going to be a learning experience for everybody for a little while. I guess I'll kind of backtrack into things that we did before she was here, and obviously we talked to them about baby and what was going on, and I feel like their ages help a lot. I think that that's a huge thing to keep in mind whenever you're going through a transition. The transition from 2 to 3 was different from 1 to 2, in my opinion, in a large part to do with their ages. Sophie was really young when we had Remy. They are exactly a year and a half apart. So she was a baby while I was pregnant, and she was a baby even when her baby sister was born, So that's a big difference between having a 5-year-old and a 3.5-year-old whenever you give birth again. So their ages very much mattered to us. We made sure, because they were going to be able to understand a lot more, to talk to them more about stuff and be honest and upfront as age appropriate as it allows. So they knew that their sister was coming, and I'm sure I mentioned it a ton of times in my pregnancy updates, but I felt like Sophie had a little bit more of an understanding than Remy did. I think she understood that we were having a baby, but obviously not exactly what that means. And just like with almost anybody, you don't really understand the situation until you're in it. So even them understanding she was coming, it's very different than when she's actually here. So we made sure to obviously do a lot of fun things with them to kind of make sure that we're taking advantage of all the time we had left, to where it was really easy for us to get up and out and do stuff, because our kids weren't babies anymore. They were toddlers. We didn't have to change diapers or bring a diaper bag, stuff like that. So going out and taking trips as a family or doing stuff together or even staying home, things are a lot simpler when you don't have to do that stuff. So we made sure to take advantage of that and made sure that we made most of the time that we had. And as far as the setup as to when we were going to be in the hospital, my husband does stay with me when I'm in the hospital. So the entire 4 to 5 days, however long I end up being in there, he is with me. So we do have to find arrangements for the older girls. Just like when we had Remy and Sophie stayed with my mom, we decided to do that again. Even before Lexi, they would spend the night at one of their grandparents every now and then. It's not unusual. They look forward to it. They ask to do it. So them spending the night with grandma is a treat, and they really, really enjoy it. Thankfully, my mom was able to take off work, so she did watch the girls while we were in the hospital. They did come up and visit a couple of times. Our hospital this time was actually a whiles away, so they didn't visit quite as much as what Sophie did in the hospital when we had Remy, but still they did make it up there, and we would send pictures and talk to them and everything else, and they had a great time. Honestly, they love their grandparents so much that when they're at Gammy and Poppy's, that's what my mom and my stepdad are called, that they don't really care what's going on at home, not even if a new baby is involved. So they were having a lot of fun. But then of course we came home, and that kind of started our adjustment into living at home with 3 kids, and it actually went a lot better than I thought it would. I wondered if Lexi waking up in the middle of the night crying would wake them up. They are pretty sound sleepers. Thankfully, they sleep in their own room together. They have bunk beds, and did not have that experience whatsoever. So they actually slept through everything, all the crying and stuff, which was great. And they were actually very interested in her. They wanted to hold her. They wanted to look at her. They just wanted to basically do anything and everything they could with her. And I think that just had to do based off of their own personal attitudes towards it. And that's going to be different for every kid. I will say that Remy was a little bit more standoffish. I shouldn't say that. Remy was a little less eager than Sophie, but I think it's because Remy can sense how fragile Lexi is, and she's very cautious when it comes to her. So Sophie just wants to gobble up all the time and everything she's allowed to do with her sister. But Remy sees it as like, I don't want to hurt the baby, I don't want to upset the baby, things like that. So she can tend to be a little bit more like, no, it's okay, I don't want to right now. You know, going through what we did with Sophie and Remy, Sophie was so young, she did not care about her sister whatsoever. She hardly ever held Remy. Obviously, being a year and a half, she cannot understand it, and she hardly paid attention to her, and it turned out just fine. I know everybody might have a different perspective on that, but honestly, they grew up and they're best friends now. Like, they are attached at the hip. They do almost everything together, and it was just fine. So I try not to force interaction because I just don't think it's necessary, at least not with our kids. So that was our experience there, and just kind of making sure that they were getting time with us. I know I said that in the other transition video I made, and it was no different this time around, except for the fact that it was a little bit more lopsided. They spent a lot of time with Mark. It ended up being like 3 full weeks by the time he went back, but like 2 work weeks, I guess you could say. But it was a really great time. I know not everybody has that luxury. He had time saved up at his job, and here in the United States, it is especially hard to get parental leave, but if you are able to do it, I would highly recommend it. It just allowed our girls to still get some one-on-one time, get out of the house, do some things that were very familiar with them. He took them to a street fair, and he took them somewhere else. I just can't remember what it is, but he went out and he did stuff with them, and maybe it was to the park. I can't really remember, but he made sure to take them out, ride their bikes, like do things that they are very used to that weren't weighed down by, okay, we got to get the baby ready, we got to do this, because they already had some of that. When we were taking them to preschool in the morning, she did have to get ready with us, and we were all getting ready and, you know, dropping off at preschool and stuff like that. So it was really important that they had that time to see that they can still have things of their own and, you know, have that time with at least one of us to themselves. I feel like I was a lot less hands-on when it came to the one-on-one time that the girls were getting, just because of the complications that I was having with my recovery. It just didn't allow for me to do much, but what I could do, I made sure to do, whether it was, you know, reading stories, doing bedtime, like just anything. Anytime they wanted to crawl up in bed with me, just allowing it, and, you know, trying to do what I could when I could and not be too hard on myself, because I don't think that helps either, especially when you're a recovering postpartum mom. And not to mention, my husband does work out of the home every single day. Well, not every single day, but 5 to 6 days out of the week. So for him to be home and them to have all that alone time, it is not something that they usually get, and I'm not going to feel bad for that either. So it might have been lopsided, but I also am home with them basically 24/7. But I mean, you could just tell that they thoroughly enjoyed themselves. I think they liked having a little bit of a normal routine. I think school did the same thing too. You know, they were able to go to school and there's no baby there. There's no mom trying to take care of baby instead of doing this or whatever. Like, it was a little bit of their normal routine that really helped. So I think as much as you can instill their normal routine, what they were used to before baby, I think it does help, at least based off of what I saw in my own kids. And now we've just slowly been integrating more of Lexi into our normal routine. Like, the more she's slowly getting herself on a routine, the more we can wrap ourselves around hers and just kind of mesh everybody together. Starting just last month, I went back to volunteering at the preschool, which I think helped me and the girls also get some of that alone time. They very much look forward to me being there during some of the days that they're at school. So that's allowed us to have some one-on-one time away from Lexi. And whenever they are at school, I get that alone time with Lexi. So I feel like it's been working out really well. I feel like we've continued to try and implement that alone time as well. And not to say that you need a ton of alone time with them or that that's the only thing that's going to make the transition key. That's not the case. There's plenty of people who don't have the opportunity for someone else to watch their kids, so everybody does have to kind of be together all the time, and they figure it out. But I mean, even if it's during nap time, like just anything at all, just taking a few minutes to really focus on your kids. I think just in general, they enjoy that. But when there's a big change in the house, it just kind of lets them know and like gives them that little nudge of like, hey, not going anywhere, never will. Just something that I've noticed with our girls, and we have allowed them to help as much as they want to when it comes to baby. Of course, if I would let Sophie, she would literally do it all. She she wants to do it all most days, but there's just some things that obviously she can't, but we let them feed her. Thankfully, she doesn't have any feeding issues like they did when they were babies. So we are actually able to let that happen. But whether it's feeding her or holding her, sometimes we'll ask them to get diapers or wipes, just little things like that. Little things like that they really enjoy helping out with. Now, I will say neither one of them have outright acted negatively towards Lexi or had any harsh feelings or even implied anything like that. Fortunately, we haven't ran into that issue, but I will say that I think their attitude a couple months after she was here started to hit the rocks. Sophie just had a really hard time with temper tantrums, and they were always about whatever it was in the moment, but there was a huge life change. There might be some stress on her and adjusting and stuff like that. So it very much could have also been the fact that we added her sister into the family, but we did see that. And with Remy, we've noticed her become a bit more, I even struggled thinking of the word last night. I don't want to say clingy because it's not like that. She's just a lot more physically touchy. Like she just wants to sit on your lap a lot more often, and she'll come over and just give you hugs and kisses and stuff like that. And I mean, she would do that stuff before, but now it's fairly regularly, and it's not when we're holding Lexi even or like to get our attention. It's just we might all be sitting there and she'll just go up to one of us and do it. So I don't know if it's being more affectionate with Lexi has just made her more affectionate, or if again it's just something she's doing because this is a transition, it's a tough time. But we have noticed those things, and no one's regressed in anything, thankfully. I know that can sometimes be an issue, whether it's potty training, eating well, like anything with kids, sleeping well. And thankfully, we haven't noticed any of that either. But those are kind of the only standouts to us as to that they might have been struggling with the transition at some point in time. But now, for the most part, I feel like they act like their typical selves, and I haven't outright noticed anything, and still no negative connotations towards their sister. I also want to mention that I think that our girls' ages is a huge role in how well they've been doing with the adjustment. They are super close. They do a lot of things together, like I've mentioned before, but that has allowed them to also lean on each other when we haven't been available. Obviously, with Lexi being a baby, she demands a lot of us. They are really self-sufficient little girls. They are very independent. They can do a good amount of stuff on their own. So for that reason, I think that maybe when they want attention or they want to play and, maybe they would turn to us and we might be busy with Lexi, they're turning to each other. Whenever they do come up to us and they ask us to play or do something and we're not able to, we do the best that we can to explain that we would really love to, but right now it's just a little difficult. And if we are able to, of course, obviously we do play with them and do what we can when we can. But I just want to mention that because our dynamic as a family beforehand, I think, played in a big role in how the transition went, because they were playing with each other so much, because they are so close in age, because they do get along great and they are self-sufficient and they do a lot of stuff on their own. That didn't really change through the transition. It just kind of allowed them to keep doing more of the same and to rely even more on each other, I guess I would say. And I would say that looking at their relationship now, I feel like Sophie and Remy are also a lot closer too. They get on each other's nerves a lot more. I've noticed that. That might just be an age thing. But since they are spending so much time together, I feel like I do notice that they are a lot closer and very much involved with each other. So the last thing that I wanted to talk about was relationships. I feel like this is probably the second most asked question to how did our kids adjust? So as far as our relationship, we've been at a different point with each kid that we've had. With Sophie, we were just engaged. With Remy, we were newly married. And with Lexi, we were married for like 4 years. So different point each time. And we've been together collectively for going on 8.5 years. We go off of that. We don't just go off of marriage. But I will say that we talked about it. And in our opinion, considering all of the transitions, going from 2 to 3 kids has been the trickiest for our relationship. And also, so this whole next part, obviously, I talked to him with, and he's completely fine with me sharing all of this. Obviously, I want to get his input and his okay with it being his relationship with me. I feel like going from no kids to 1 was the second hardest, just because it adds the entire new dynamic of being mom and dad to your relationship. This time has been harder, and I think that we've boiled it down to just the lack of communication. And I think that just comes with having 3 kids, especially 3 kids that are in different seasons of life. So it spreads you a bit thinner. For me personally, it was easier when we had Remy because Sophie was not in school. I was able to just stay home with the both of them. That was my day. Not to say that's not hard, but it does get a little bit trickier to juggle not only staying home, but then leaving and packing up at different times to go pick up kids from preschool, a drop off, and just everything. So not only are you staying home, but you have to leave sometimes to go get other kids and do things outside the home while also mainly being home. So it just adds a different dynamic, and it makes you busier. It makes things a little bit more crazy and hectic. And then you have, different programs and meetings and things like that when your kids are in school, it just kind of becomes a part of it, and it becomes a little trickier. Your time is spent more in how to juggle things, and you run out of the patience and the energy that you should be using to talk to each other. With everybody working and everybody trying to take care of the house and the kids and everything else that needs to be done, whenever you do run into an argument where maybe you could easily just talk things out, maybe you're tired, you're exhausted, you don't want to, you don't have the patience, you need to do 3 more other things and you just need to get to it, so you don't talk to each other the way you should be talking to each other. And that's something that we've personally experienced, and something that we've thankfully been able to notice and address, and we're working on it and taking the time, even if we don't want to, even when there is other things to do. This household runs on us being a team. So if we're not a team and we're not communicating well, then what are we doing? Like, everything can wait if we can figure that out. So it's worth it to take that time to figure things out, even if it feels like we've got other things to do, or we don't have the energy, or we just can't do this right now. Like, it's worth it to take the time and to figure it out and to just talk it out with each other. Thankfully, Mark and I 99% of the time are in a great place, and we continue to work on ourselves in our marriage, but we're typically just doing the normal stuff that works for us. So we were able to kind of notice this after we did it a few times, and we were able to finally kind of talk things down and like boil it all the way down to the problem, and been able to focus on it and be intentional. It would be really easy to just let it go and to figure it out later and stuff like that, but we need to be intentional. If we want to be the team that we know we can be for our family and for each other, then it's like we have to choose to take these moments to stop and figure things out and to choose to communicate a lot better. And I feel like we have slowly been getting better at it. Obviously, of course, we are not great at it. This situation is new to us too. I think that's something that I don't even think of going into having another baby, is that we've never been here before. So we also need to have patience with ourselves and, you know, make sure that we are taking care of ourselves and our marriage and everything else. So it's something that doesn't always come to my mind, but we have to be very intentional about it, because if we just let this slack, it would probably cause a lot of problems down the road. So it has been trickier. I just feel like what Mark told me the other day, I kind of had a minute with him and I had like a mom guilt moment, and I was talking it out with him, and he said, "You're the best mom, but right now you're figuring out how to spread that best over 3 kids instead of 2. And I feel like that just puts it perfectly. Like, we're all trying our best, but when you add a new baby in, you learn how to spread that over even more kids, and it can be super tricky. Me as a mom transitioning from 2 to 3 kids, it's been the hardest. Even though my kids are older now, I feel like I'm needed in so many different areas, because I do have a little baby who needs me for everything, but my big girls need me to lay out their clothes for preschool, to pick them up at certain times, to talk out bigger lessons with them and figure out friendships and other things that they're discovering in life. And there's just so many different ways that I need to be a mom now, that it has been really challenging for me to figure out how to do all of that, work on our marriage, and make sure that we're being intentional and taking care of it, you know, taking care of ourselves, giving ourselves times, because I think that's also important, so you don't just completely lose it at some point. And also, you know, the house and working, and it's just a lot to juggle, but it's something that'll come with time. You know, like, I didn't get to the place that I was with the girls before we had Lexi overnight. That came with years and years and years, obviously. So, you know, the more time goes on, the more we'll find our groove, the more things will get a bit more steady and usual, and we'll have a routine and figure things out, and it will just come. But I think right now, choosing to be intentional with the time that we spend with the girls, the older girls, also being intentional and making sure that we're communicating well as husband and wife is super important. Making sure that we're on the same page as mom and dad is super important. And also giving time that we can to ourselves. For Mark to do things that he enjoys as Mark, those things are what's important. Everything else can wait right now. Overall, I think the transition has been going really great, and I'm really proud of everybody. Everyone's doing their absolute best, and I'm really thankful that things have gone this well, and hopefully that this was semi-insightful and I didn't ramble too much. I thought about making notes, but then I thought, better not. I'd rather just talk to you like if a girlfriend had asked me, and just sit down and talk to you like I would to her and tell you my experience. And that's honestly where we're at, and at like not even 5 months. And I'm really happy with how things are going. And I think it shows that things don't have to be perfect, but you can still figure them out. I'm the type of person who wants a plan. I want to be able to figure things out ahead of time so I'm not surprised. And this is always one of those things that you don't really know how to navigate it until you're in it with your family. Every kid is different, every family is different, every relationship is different. So how all of yours are going to react to this situation could be very different than mine. So I'm just trying to share what I can in case there are some similarities, and just kind of put that out there. It's adding a whole new little human being to your world as a family, so it's going to take a minute. If there's any other specific questions that I didn't get to in this video, leave them down in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and as always, thanks for watching.